Hello and welcome to 10,000 Stitches podcast, a weekly chit chat all about the joys of sock knitting. My name is Andy and I'm glad that you're here to spend a little bit of time with me this week, whether you are returning from episode 1 last week or if you are starting right here on episode 2. It's always a good time to jump in. This is episode 2. Just so I note this before I get any further in and then forget, today's date when I am recording is Sunday, December 13th, and this will be posted on Wednesday, December 16th. I mentioned that last week that I will be recording these a couple days ahead of when I will be posting them. I plan to post every Wednesday, and that's just because that way I buy myself plenty of time to get it uploaded and everything like that between recording and publishing. So like I said, my name is Andy. Where you can find me is, you can find me on most social media as Purlbug, P-U-R-L-B-U-G. That's my handle on Instagram, Twitter, and Ravelry, although I'm not very active on Twitter. And I'm working on being more active on Ravelry. You can find my blog at thepurlbug.com, and that will be linked down in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on the blog, you're already there. And there's also a Ravelry group that I started after last week's podcast. So that will also be linked down in the description box or somewhere down below the video, unless you're watching this in the discussion group, in which case, congrats, you're there. Excuse me. I just ate a cookie, so I have like cookie mouth. A little bit about what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I apologize if I seem a little kind of fuzzy and disjointed today and that I'm not as well put together as I was last week. I am very tired. I didn't get as much sleep last night as I wanted, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It's entirely my fault, but I'm still gonna pout about it and be sad because now I'm very tired and I'm one of those people who doesn't nap very well, so I'm just doomed to be tired all day. So after this, I'm gonna probably make a pot of coffee and have some coffee and more cookies to get myself through the rest of the day. That's also why I'm wearing my spectacles. This is probably one of the few times you'll actually see me wearing them because while I like them just fine, my eyes are really bad. And so my glasses are very heavy because to have lenses this big, even with like the really nice high index lenses, they're still heavy. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I actually can't see the screen, but I don't know if you can see how thick my lenses are. Yeah, my eyes are really bad. Like, it's the point where if I take them off, I can see that there's something, moving around on the screen, but I can't actually see my own face on the screen. So, yeah, pretty bad. Which is why I usually wear my contacts. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about today. Again, if you see me looking down to the side here, that's because this is where my notebook is that has my notes in it. So we did the intro and where to find me. I'm going to talk about finished objects, works in progress, new stuff that I have acquired since when I last recorded, plus a little rant about that's relevant. I'm going to talk a little bit about my project to knit 50 pairs of socks in 2016 and kind of talk a little bit about like some sort of self-imposed rules, and then I have some kind of pondering questions to pose just to get people's opinions on. Excuse me. And then I'll do a little bit of the personal stuff, kind of, what happened over the past week and stuff like that at the end, because I know a lot of the podcasts that I watch, they tend to do that kind of stuff at the end, and I think that's a good idea because if you only care about the knitting stuff, I don't want to bore you with that stuff and make you skip over it, so I'll do that at the end. Finished objects. I have 2 finished objects to show, and one of them kind of, I feel like doesn't count because I kind of showed it to you last week. These were the Christmas socks for my mom, and I now have 2 of them. Last week I only had one of them done, so now I have both of them done. And these were knit toe up. It's a 64 stitch sock knit toe up on size 2.5 millimeter needles, which I believe is a US 1.5, with a short row heel. Like I mentioned last week, the stitch pattern on this is the Nutkin pattern, and I will link that not below on YouTube, but I will link that below if you're watching this on the blog or if you're watching it on the Ravelry thread for this episode. I'll make sure to link any patterns that I talk about or anything else relevant that I mentioned that could be linked. But anyway, so the Nutkin pattern only has this chart, like the kind of swirly, lacy things going in one direction, and so it has 2 panels of that on the front and then 4 on the leg. But a lot of people have problems with their socks using that pattern starting to twist because you only have these twists going in one direction. So I mirrored it on the front to prevent that problem, and just because I think it looks better. Like, I like things to be symmetrical and all of that. So I did, 2 panels of that on the front and then 4 on the leg. And these are for my mother. I don't know if I actually mentioned that when I said they were Christmas socks, but these are a Christmas gift for my mother. So yeah, and these were knit with opal. I forget the exact name of the yarn, but I think it's like something about a detective. It's like it's got a parrot on the label. Anyway, these are opal. They've been washed. I washed them with wool wash in a hope to soften them up, and they're still kind of scratchy, but I don't think they're unwearable, and I'm planning on telling them that they can wash them in the machine because they're machine washable. So I'm sure that will soften them up as well. So anyway, so that is that finished object, which you saw last week. And then my other finished object, which was done between then and now, is another pair of socks, obviously. And so these require a little bit of backstory. I learned how to knit, I think it's English style, that's where you throw, it's right-handed knitting. That's how I learned how to knit, and that's how I've been doing it pretty much my whole life. And recently I've been trying to look for ways to make myself a faster knitter. And so I started trying to learn how to knit continental style, which is where you hold your yarn in your left hand, throwing versus picking. And I can knit actually pretty fast, as long as I'm just, doing straight stockinette. I can knit pretty fast continental style. But what I'm realizing is that it really messes with my tension and gauge. And so these socks are an example of that. These were knit entirely continental. And I'll show you the pair first. So these are made using Patton's Croix Sing in the Blues stripes. And it worked so hard to try and get the stripes to match. Well, I actually tried, which I don't usually do. So that's me working hard to get the stripes to match. But anyway, I tried, and you can see they're pretty good on the leg. They're maybe like a row or 2 off. Enough that, like, if you're actually wearing them, I don't think it's noticeable. But then it starts to get a little wonky with the heels, and then by the time you're down at the toes, I lost the plot. But anyway, these are a 64 stitch sock. It's got 15 rows of 1x1 twisted rib, 60 rows in the leg, short row heel, 65 rows in the foot, and then a rounded toe foot thing. And I actually have started doing my toes using the toe that's spelled out in Mina from the Knitting Expat, her 2 at a time sock pattern. I really like the rounded toe that gives, so I've started using that, and I will link that pattern down below the video, wherever it is. But yeah, I really like the way that toe looks, as opposed to before my toes were kind of pointy, which fits my foot just fine, but I like the way this toe looks. But anyway, so knitting continental style really throws off my tension, and you can see that. These are both 64 stitch socks knit on the same size of needles, and yeah, you can see, so they're lined up at this side, and you can see how much bigger this sock is and how much longer. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. So I decided that, you know what? I'm going back to my normal way of knitting. I'm pretty fast that way still, and I have millions of stitches worth of muscle memory guiding that, so whatever. I'm just going to do it that way. I know it's not the most efficient way, but for me, even if I went down to a really small needle, I just can't fix this problem. So for now, I'm just going to go back to my old way of knitting. Anyway, so these are obviously way too big for me, but I'm pretty sure that they will fit my mother's boyfriend's feet just fine. And I showed the pair of Christmas socks I made him last week. So these will just be a second pair of socks for him, and which is fine because I don't love this striping yarn anyway. So yeah, I'm sure he'll like them, and hopefully they fit just fine. Once I realized that they were going to be way too big for me, I made them to fit his foot. So yeah, so that's that. And I think that's it for finished objects. So then works in progress. I have 2 works in progress. The first one is a pair of socks. The second, which I will show first, I guess, because it's right here. The second is I started a little sock scrap blanket last night. So I'm 6 squares in, and these are, let's see, I have to figure out how I'm holding this. So these 4 are just Patton's Croix, and then these 2 are the opals. that I made the Christmas socks out of. So I'm just joining them as I go, trying to weave in ends kind of as I finish them, although this one didn't get done. This was the last square I finished last night. And it's not perfect, and I don't expect it to be perfect. Like, you can see on the back that it's just kind of a mess of ends woven in and stuff like that. And I'm actually thinking that I'm just going to give myself permission to make the back really messy, and when I finish it, I might, like, put a backing on it, like put a sheet or a piece of flannel or something on the back, kind of like a quilt, and, you know, do little ties at the corners. And that way, you know what, I don't need to worry about how the back looks, and I'm not going to stress myself out about it right now. But I'm just doing basic sort of mitered garter stitch squares. Each one is 35 stitches, and I am knitting them on these double points that I have, and I think these are US size 5. Not entirely sure. I don't know where the rest of the double points in this size went. These were the only 2 I could find in my box of needles. Whatever. I have another like circular needle in a US size 5, so I'm pretty sure these are the same size as that. But whatever, they'll work. They work fine for these little squares. And like I said, I'm doing 35 stitches, and then I do the centered double decrease and purl on the wrong side, and just do that. And you'll see one of them, I don't know how this happened, but this guy is actually going the other direction of all the others. And that's just another thing that, you know what, does it really matter? No, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. So yeah, so that's that, and I'm going to try and add as I go with it, but, and I have more like Patton's Croix that I could add to it, but some of them are really small balls of like the FX colors, and I really wanted to use those as like contrasting toes on plainer colored socks, so I'm not sure if I want to use them up on this blanket or maybe save them to do that with them. But yeah, so I'm 6 squares in. Woot. Awesome. So then my other work in progress is a pair of socks. I have one of them done, so I can show what one of them looks like and the other's on the needles. But this sock pattern I'm calling my Forest for the Trees socks, you know, the whole missing the forest for the trees. And the reason that I'm calling them that is because they have this sort of a lace pattern on them that looks like little pine trees. So these are knit out of Patton's Croix. The color is flax, and then the heels and toe are knit with the Patton's Croix FX in the clover colors, because I had a little ball of that. And I mean, how perfect is this? Like, it's, you know, it's got those greens and the oranges and stuff for fall leaves and stuff to go with the trees. I love it. So these are knit on a size 1, which is a 2.25 millimeter needle. And these are going to be for my friend, my best girlfriend back in Minnesota. I've been promising to knit her socks for like pretty much ever since I started, and she saw the picture I posted of just this top part on Instagram, and she's like, oh my gosh, I love these. And so her foot is roughly the same width as mine, but it's a little bit shorter, so I was like, they're yours. So, because I hadn't finished this one at the time. So this is going to be for her, and the other one the other one I'm just starting into the trees, so I think you can see that. So I just started into the trees. So basically the way this works is it's 15 rows of 2x2 rib, and then I knit 5 rows plain, and then this tree pattern is a 35 stitch pattern. And then, so that's 40 stitches by the time you get done with, or 40 rows. Sorry, it's a 35 row pattern, and it's 11 stitches wide. Each tree is 11 stitches wide. And then, so it's 40 rows by the time you get to the bottom of the trees. Then I knit another 20 rows, did the short row heel. There's hair on there. And then I think for her foot, the foot part wound up being 60 stitches long, or 60 rows long. And then again, I did that rounded toe from Mina's pattern. So yeah, I like it. Like I said, this is on a size 1, and I really like the nice sturdy fabric that it's making. So I started this one on, I think, Friday morning, and I finished it up yesterday evening. And then I started this one this morning, and like I said, I've done the ribbing, I've done the 5 plain rows, and I have like 1 set of branches for the tree. So yeah, so I'm assuming that I will probably get done with the trees and get pretty close to the heel with this by the end of the day. So yeah. So that's my works in progress. And while I have this in my hands, let's talk about the new stuff that I have, because I have a few new things. Oh, so about these tree ones. So I had seen this sock similar to this posted on, I think a picture posted on Instagram where they had that kind of pine tree pattern, and I thought it was really cool. So I just kind of came up with my own chart for that. So yeah, it's nothing complicated. I will probably find a way to like digitize this chart and post it on my project page with this. So I guess if you want that chart, just take a look at my projects. Probably not immediately, but within the next week or two, I should have that chart up on my project page for this, and so you can just put it on whatever you want. But yeah, so that's that. So yeah, new stuff. I mentioned last week that I had some knitting needles coming in the mail, and I got these on Thursday. So this is kind of I have a little bit of a story to tell with these. Last week I mentioned, I think, that I only had one set of sock needles, and so they were the sock needles I had been using since I started knitting socks. That's a pair of, I think these are the Addy Turbos. That's pretty long so that I could do magic loop on them, and I had decided to get new ones because the finish on these was coming off, and I don't know how well you can see that, but the finish was starting to come off, so I just wanted some new needles. So I ordered Chiaogoos, however you pronounce it. Chiaogoos, I guess is how I'm gonna go ahead and pronounce it. That's how it's spelled. So however you pronounce that. So I ordered some of these from the Sassy Sheep on Etsy, and I don't remember if that's where I ordered my previous pair of them, because I have a size 8 that's long enough to do magic loop with as well, that I had ordered off of Etsy forever ago. So I don't remember if I ordered that from the Sassy Sheep or not, but anyway, I would highly recommend. It's super fast shipping, got here a day earlier than I expected it to, packaged well. I mean, there were no problems with them or anything, and decently priced. I think these were $9 per circular needle. Lots of different choices, so yeah, I would recommend, I guess, and I'll link that shop wherever I'm linking things that are relevant. But anyway, I ordered two 24-inch size zeros and two 24-inch size ones. And the reason that I did that is because I'm sick of magic loop. I really prefer knitting with two circular needles. To me, it just makes my needle management a little bit easier, and my yarn management just becomes a lot easier when I'm not magic looping. So this is, I think, my most efficient way of knitting socks. So yeah, that's why I ordered two of the same size in the same length. And so the reason that I ordered a size 1 and a size 0 was because I remembered that these were a size 1. And these are, the size I'm used to knitting on. So I was like, I'd like to be able to do this with the size I'm used to. So I ordered a size 1 and then the next size down, just in case I wanted a little bit tighter, stitches. So I had these socks on the needles when I picked up my new ones from the post office. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to switch in the middle of my project and put my new needles in and, start working with those. So I take the size 1s out of the package and I'm, holding them, getting ready to, switch out my needles and stuff. And I'm like, these don't seem right. Like, this doesn't seem like it's the same size as this one. So I kind of, hold them up next to each other and just kind of, I'm like eyeballing it. I'm like, eh. No, they're not the same size. So then I start looking on this one, and on these, you won't be able to see this, but on the cord is like the size and stuff printed on there. And so on here it says, made in Germany, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, let me see if I can find, okay. So it says, 120 centimeters. That's the length of the needle itself. It says US number 1. And then it says, where is it? 2.5 millimeters. Except a US 1 isn't 2.5 millimeters. A US 1 is 2.25 millimeters. So there's that. So I had actually been knitting, I think this is a US 1.5 for however long, which is fine. It's not a big deal. Like, obviously it's been working fine for me. But it meant that, the ones that I had ordered thinking they were the same size as this were not in fact the same size. So in the end, it's fine because now I have 3 needle sizes instead of just 2. But it was kind of annoying, and it's kind of annoying to me how inconsistent needle sizing can be. This is my rant about things. It's kind of annoying to me how inconsistent needle sizing can be, and I feel like it's especially bad with like some of the smaller needles where people will just call them whatever they want to call them, and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. And just in general, like I was trying to explain needle sizing to Wesley the other day, and just how like silly the US sizing is. Like when you measure them in millimeters, it makes total sense because it's like, okay, well, that's just how big it is. But then like when you start assigning the US sizes to them, it doesn't make any sense because you have all the small ones which go up in like half sizes for like quarter millimeters, and then you start going up in whole millimeters as you get to some of the bigger sizes, and then you have the higher end of the spectrum where it's like, okay, well, you have a 10, a 10 and a half, an 11, and then it jumps to 13, then 15, 17, 19. How does that make sense? I don't get it. So whatever, I'd rather do the metric sizing because at least then I know exactly what I'm getting. And I have no problem thinking in metric because of my, background in science. I'm fine with metric. So, but I will, when I talk about needles, I will say the metric size and the US size. But that was just very annoying to me, that it's not consistent. It's like, it's not that hard, just be consistent. Anyway, the nice thing is that I'm really enjoying the slightly tighter fabric that these size 1s are giving me, and I'm excited to try the size 0s. I'm probably going to try that on my next pair of socks once I finish with my Forest for the Tree socks. But anyway, that was the purchase that I had coming in the mail, so yay, that's awesome. Then the other thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about the visit to the yarn shop, but I went to the yarn shop the one local yarn shop that I've found here in Richmond. I know there's multiples, but I went to the one that I'm pretty sure is the one closest to me. And I mentioned before that I'm not crazy about them because they don't have a huge selection of sock yarn, but I went there because after I finish my Forest for the Tree socks, I have the one ball of opal left. That is the one that I'd mentioned that I don't really know what to do with it because it's beautiful, but I don't know if I want to make it into socks or not, but I probably just will. But anyway, then I'm down to one ball of yarn, and then the scraps, of course. But I'm down to one ball of yarn, and that was it. And I was like, I'm probably going to burn through that before we go home for the holidays, so I wanted yarn to take with me for, travel knitting and stuff. So I went to the yarn store and picked up some stuff. And the first one I got is a Regia 4-ply. This is actually one of their Arnie and Carlos design line ones, which I didn't even look at that when I bought it. I just picked out the color, but that's kind of cool. I like a lot of those. And so the color is 03764. I don't know. I didn't look it up ahead of time, but it's this kind of like orange with little bits of blue and cream, and there's a little bit of gray in there too. I don't know how well it's showing up on, oh, sorry. This thing, it's a front-facing camera, so it reverses everything, so I'm still trying to get used to that. But anyway, I thought this was super fun, super cute and bright. I will probably wind up using this to knit socks for Wesley's mother, because I know she will wear wool socks. Actually, the only pairs of smart wool socks I got from her, because they didn't fit her feet right. Like, she has short feet, but her feet are pretty wide, and so she has trouble, with some of those commercial socks. So I will probably, when we're home for Christmas, get a tracing of her foot and make her a pair of socks out of this. But I like it. It's a little spendy. Like, this was $18 for this, which I'll talk a little bit more about it when I talk about my 2016 sock project stuff. But that's a little bit more than I would maybe like to spend on a sock yarn. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this knits up, and I think it will be very pretty. And all the pictures I've seen of the Arnie and Carlos design line are very pretty. So yeah, so that's the first one. And then the next two, you ready for this? You sitting down? Okay. Bam! So the next two are these, the Neon Now by the Plymouth Yarn. And so they're the two neon ones. This one is color 005, which has like highlighter yellow and green, and then some dark blue, and then some really bright pink. So that one's kind of excited. It's a striping yarn. And then the other one is color 001, which is basically pinks and purples. Bam! So because I love neon colors. Like I said, my wardrobe is pretty plain. So, you know, any little way that I can work in some really bright colors, I'm going to. And I forgot to mention it. So this is 75%, 75% virgin wool, 25% polyamide. These are also 75% wool, 25% polyamide, nylon, whatever you want to call it. So what I think I'm going to do with these is I think I'm going to do a pair of inversible socks. And again, this comes from Mina, on the Knitting Expat podcast. She did a pair of these with like Christmas colors where you do, like, you know, for one of the socks you do like cuff, toe, and heel in one color, and then you knit the body in the other color, and then you flip it for the other sock. So they sort of match, but they don't, like they're inverses of each other. And then you get 2 pairs of socks out of 2 balls of yarn, but they are kind of fun like that. So I thought I would do that and maybe make 1 pair for me and 1 pair for my mother, because I know she will probably gladly wear super ridiculously bright socks. So yeah, so that's that. And yeah, I guess, so I mentioned this last week, talking about new stuff. I mentioned this last week, but I will probably be mostly purchasing my yarn in like big batches online. So this will probably be the last yarn that I buy in a store for a little while, unless I absolutely need something. But I asked, you know, I asked my family members for yarn for Christmas because you know, it's small, it should fit in my luggage just fine and stuff like that. So I asked them for yarn for Christmas. So I'm kind of waiting to see if any of them actually will get me yarn. And there's also a yarn store by Wesley's parents' house that I might pop into. So I might buy some more yarn in a store there, but we'll see. I mean, it's, again, that's kind of spendy. But we'll see if something else catches my eye, or if maybe I find more of these neon ones. Who knows? But otherwise, I'll probably be ordering online. I'm looking at Knit Picks. I'm probably going to place a decently large order from there once I kind of, once the holidays are over and I kind of know what my yarn situation is going to be. But I really want some like solid colors, and I'm having a hard time finding those in stores anyway. So I'm probably going to place a big order through there. But I need to find space first for where we'll actually go in our apartment, because we have a very small apartment. And so I don't want to bring it in before I have a nice place to put it. But yeah. Anyway. So I guess that maybe gets me into my, talking about my 2016 socks, because that factors in with how I'm acquiring the yarn. So, like I said, my plan for 2016 is to knit 50 pairs of socks. And there is some structure to this project. You know, it's not just 50 pairs of vanilla socks, because that would get super boring. So I have some patterns picked out. Sorry. I have some patterns picked out that I'm going to be knitting. Because, yeah, otherwise it's just going to be really boring for me and for you guys. So, yeah. I have some patterns picked out, and what I'm kind of going to be doing is I'm going to be sorting them into different categories, and kind of every 2 months doing a different category. So the categories that I have are ribbing, so designs that are primarily based on just different rib patterns. And then cables, lace, unusual construction. Why do I feel like I'm forgetting one? Ribbing, cables, lace, unusual construction, and then color work, so like stranded socks. And then the last one is, I guess, like yarn enhancing patterns. So that will be for like yarns that are like self-striping, or heavily variegated yarns, you know, gradient yarns, things like that. So patterns that bring out the best in yarns, like patterns that showcase the yarn rather than the yarn showcasing the pattern, if that makes sense. So like I said, I'm gonna, you know, I have those kind of 6 categories, and so every 2 months I'm gonna be focusing on a different thing. So the first one I know is gonna be ribbing, because that's kind of the easiest one, and that way I can really build up some momentum. And for anyone who wants to follow along and knit some of the same patterns that I am, it's the easiest place to start, because it's not really that different than a vanilla sock. So, yeah, so I'm gonna be doing that. And that way there's some structure in place, and if you guys want to follow along and knit some of the patterns, you kind of know what, you know, what we're in and stuff like that. Excuse me. And I'm also thinking about doing knit-alongs to go with that, but right now it's still in the very preliminary thinking sort of phase. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm thinking about doing that if people would be interested. So like doing a knit along through January and February that focuses on socks with ribbed patterns, different sort of ribbed patterns. And then maybe, March and April, we focus on socks with that showcase cables, things like that. Just a thought. Let me know what you think about that. So yeah, so that's that. And then also for 2016, for these socks. So 50 pairs of socks is a lot of socks, which means I have to buy a lot of yarn. And so something that has to be taken into consideration is budget for all of this yarn, right? Because if you assume 1 skein per pair of socks, that's 50 skeins of yarn, 50 100-gram skeins of yarn that I need to purchase throughout the course of the year. So I have to set a budget, or otherwise, because if I'm buying all, indie yarns off of Etsy, that's gonna just eat through a lot of money. So my budget for the year is I want to average no more than $20 per pair of socks. And I decided on that because, if you go out and you buy a pair of like smart wool socks or something, that's gonna run you about $18, $15, somewhere between $15 and $20, depending on, what kind you get and stuff like that. So to me, it's like, okay, that seems reasonable for a pair of hand knit socks. Obviously, I want to come in under that because if I spent $20 on each pair of socks, that's $1,000 over the course of the years. That's a lot of money. So I want to come in less than that, obviously. And my goal is to come in far less than that in the beginning. Like in the beginning, I want to be averaging $10 or maybe less per pair of socks, because that way I figure I can build up a little bit of a surplus in my budget so that by the end of the year when I get to, because the last set of patterns I want to do is the yarn enhancing patterns. So at that point I want to have a little bit of a surplus built up in my budget so that then if I want to splurge on some really beautifully hand-dyed yarns, stuff like that, I can, and it's like, well, I've been, playing it cool for the whole year, so now if I want to spend $40 on a pair of socks, that's okay. I've kind of earned it. So that's my goal, is to, at the very beginning, average about $10 per pair, and then maybe go up a little bit higher towards the end. And so the way I'm going to be doing that is by buying in bulk, pretty much, and by buying through places like Knit Picks and stuff like that that have yarn decently cheap. I've never knit with Knit Picks before, but I've heard good things about it, and they have a lot of different colors and stuff like that. So that's probably where I'm going to be ordering from after the holidays, and once I kind of figure out my yarn situation, I'm probably going to be putting in a big order to them. I think I figured that through there I can average about $10 a pair, because a lot of the patterns I want to do in the beginning, the ribbed patterns and cables and lace and stuff, I really want the yarn to showcase the pattern. So I don't want the yarns to be busy. I want them to be pretty solid, pretty basic. So Knit Picks seems to be a good source for that kind of yarn. I actually could do even better if I ordered like naked yarn and dyed my own yarn, but I just don't want to make that kind of a time investment into it. So yeah, so that's kind of my plan. But yeah, definitely no more than $20 per pair of sock. And I will definitely be transparent about it if you guys want. I have no problem saying how much the yarn is costing me, because I think with a project this ambitious, it's important to be transparent about that. And I think a lot of knitters tend to not be very transparent about how much money they're spending on their hobby. And I've done this before with fountain pens. Like with my fountain pen blogging and stuff, I have no problem saying what my budget is or how much I spend, because that's just part of it. And there's nothing to be ashamed of there. If I want to spend hundreds of dollars on yarn or fountain pens or whatever, that's my prerogative, as long as I'm still paying the rent every month. So yeah. But yeah, so if you want me to be transparent about that, let me know. If you don't, let me know. I can do it either way. But yeah, so that's kind of the plan for 2016. I also have a few other socks that I want to make that don't necessarily fall into like patterns, and those will probably come towards the end with those yarn enhancing patterns. I'll probably wind up with like about 40 patterns, and then because I want to leave some room for vanilla socks, because I'm sure probably in each sort of round of different categories I'm going to want to knit just a vanilla sock. I'm going to have a hard week or something like that where it's just like I just want to knit a sock and I don't want to think about it very hard. So I want to leave room for that. I don't want to pick out 50 patterns. And if I don't get to a pattern that I picked out, I don't want it to be a big deal. They're just for guidance. But I also want to, I want to make a sport weight sock at some point. I want to make a worsted weight, like slipper sock at some point. I want to make a rainbow sock at some point. I want to make a neon sock, and I probably will not count these. I'll probably get some different neon yarn and do that towards the end of the year. But yeah, so there's some things like that too. I want to make a sock for Wesley, so like a very plain, basic, boring sock because he likes boring socks. But yeah, so we'll kind of talk more about that kind of as those things come up, I guess. What else? So I guess that kind of leads me into some questions that I had for you guys. Just some things that I would love some thoughts on. And by the way, so I posed the question last week, kind of, if you are not a sock knitter, why not? And if you are a sock knitter, but if you knit socks but you don't love it, why not? And I got some great kind of responses on that. And there's been some interesting discussion going on in the Ravelry group. People introducing themselves, talking about their history knitting socks and stuff like that. So definitely head over to that if you want to kind of be part of that, because that's fun, I think. And I will enjoy the discussion. I probably should have said this at the beginning. Like I said, I'm tired, I'm a little scatterbrained. But yeah, and on that note, since I'm already on that note, I do read those things, but I don't always respond because I'm busy. So yeah, but I am there, I am reading, so I appreciate all of your guys' feedback and interaction. Anyway, so questions for this week. So my first question is a sort of sock maintenance question. So I have some socks that I've knitted, this year since I started knitting socks. And I recorded a video of all the socks that I made in 2015 that you guys haven't seen yet. I'm not going to be putting that on this week's video, but I will probably tack it onto the very last episode of December, which I think will be on like the 30th or something. I'll probably tack it onto that episode because that episode will come right after we've been traveling. And so I don't know how recording is going to work. But anyway, I'll probably tack it onto there. But that will happen towards the end of the month. Anyway, so some of my socks that I knit early on seem like they've been stretching out. And I don't know if that's because I've been knitting them on needles that were bigger than I thought they were or what. But I was wondering if other people have experienced that with like socks that you knit starting to stretch out a little bit. And if the solution is just to knit tighter, just, knit on smaller needles and that will prevent it, or what? Or yeah. So any thoughts on that? I don't know. I just know what I've seen in some of my socks that I've knit earlier on. They seem to not fit as tightly anymore as they used to. So granted, they're still wearable, but for they're not foot huggy anymore. So yeah, so let me know thoughts on that. So my other question, more related to patterns and stuff for 2016. So I'm still kind of figuring out kind of what my favorite method of knitting socks is. I had initially started with a lot of toe-up socks with after that heels, and then I went back to top-down socks with heel flaps, which I like, but I don't like knitting. I like the fit of them, I don't like knitting them. Like I find it to be very hard on my hands with all those stitches on the needles at once and decreasing and everything, and so they just hurt my hands to knit them. So now I've been knitting top-down socks with short row heels, and I like that. I like the way it looks. I like how easy it is to do a contrasting heel and toe. I like that I don't have to deal with gussets and stuff like that. So that brings me to my question about patterns. So some of the patterns that I'm using, that I've picked out, it seems like, the heel style, whatever the heel style is, it doesn't really impact the pattern. There's a stitch pattern associated with it, but I could easily sub in a short row heel instead of a heel flap and gusset. It doesn't really matter. It's going to look the same anyway. Versus some of them, the heel flap is actually integrated into the pattern, and it's actually, a cool part of the pattern. So, I'm thinking that for patterns where it doesn't matter, where it honestly won't impact the aesthetic or the construction of the sock, I'm just going to sub in whichever heel I want to do. Whichever heel and toe I like the best, I will sub that in. And then for ones where it actually is a part of the pattern, where it's an important design element, then I'll do whatever the pattern calls for. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on, taking a pattern, how it's written versus taking a pattern kind of as inspiration and making modifications as you prefer. Because at the end of the day, a sock's no good if you don't want to wear it or if you don't want to knit the second one. That's tough. Like if you get through the first one, you're like, oh, that was awful, I don't want to knit the second one. Then you've wasted your time on the first one. Or if you knit it exactly the way the pattern says, but you don't want to wear it the way that it's knit, then you wasted your time too. So just thoughts on that, because you'll probably be seeing that, and I'm just curious to hear what people think about that. I hope that question made sense out loud. Like I said, tired. In my brain it totally made sense, but who knows out loud. Yeah, so that's that. I guess that's the knitting stuff. So if you are only here for the knitting stuff, that's all I got for you. If you want to hang around for the personal stuff, let's do that. So personal stuff. I think I mentioned this last week that, I got a job out here, but I'm not starting until after the holidays, and because it's a faculty position, there's just a lot of paperwork that has to be done and just a lot of red tape that has to be worked through and stuff like that. So, we're working through that. I went in and talked to the department chair the other day and just kind of chit-chatted with him and stuff like that, and I had a couple questions, but he said that it will probably wind up that while my job will be mostly kind of behind the scenes stuff, dealing with classes and things, I will actually wind up teaching probably a lab section, which some people will be like, oh man, but I really love teaching. I really, really enjoy teaching, and I'm super excited to hear that I will actually be teaching in spring semester. Even if it's just one lab section, that's fine. Because one, I love teaching, and two, so I mentioned that I also blog about fountain pens and things like that. And it's been hard while I've been unemployed to talk about fountain pens and things because I just don't write as much when I'm unemployed. So teaching again means more grading, which means chances to use my pens. So that's really exciting. So yeah, things are moving forward, and it's nice to kind of, know that things are moving forward, and it's actually allowing me to enjoy the rest of my unemployment, make it into fun employment, because, I know that it's just a couple more weeks and then I'll be back to work again, and that's been really nice. So I talked a little bit about it on my videos on my fountain pen channel, but being unemployed was hard, and it really took a toll on kind of my emotions, my self-esteem and stuff. And so it's been good to be employed again, or to know employment is coming again. So that's been really nice. Anyway, what else over this past week? So we started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Netflix, which I had actually started watching before. I actually started watching it way back this time last year, because, like I said, around this time last year, I moved from Nebraska back up to Wisconsin, and the way that worked was that Wesley and his father came down with their trailer and loaded up all of my stuff, all the stuff that I couldn't fit in my own car. They took everything out of my apartment, but I wasn't done yet. Like, they came down, I think, the week before finals or something like that, so I wasn't done yet. So I still stayed there for about 5 days or a week or something after that. So I was sleeping in a sleeping bag on the floor in my apartment. I didn't have my TV. I just had, me and my computer and whatever kitchen stuff I absolutely needed. So it was pretty bleak. So I spent a lot of time watching Netflix because I was just all alone in my apartment. So I started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Netflix at that time. And I stopped watching it about midway through the first season, because, as anyone who's watched it knows, it gets a little heavy kind of towards the middle with, like, what happened with Agent Coulson and everything, and I don't want to give anything away, but it gets pretty intense right around the middle of the season. And I think it was because it got pretty intense, and I watched a whole bunch of shows all at once, and I was staying up kind of late, and I wasn't sleeping well because I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag. So it actually wound up giving me nightmares. I think all of those things combined just were not good. So I stopped watching it at that point, and I picked it up, whatever day it was. I said Thursday or Friday or something, and Wesley and I started watching it again. And oh my gosh, so now we're almost to the end of season 1. Such a good show. I highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of those kinds of shows. Not necessarily the superhero thing. Like, I'm not a super fan of like Marvel and the superhero thing. Like, I haven't seen a lot of the Marvel movies recently, but it reminds me a lot of like Numbers, or CSI a little bit, but more on the supernatural side. But I kind of like that kind of show. So yeah, so we're almost to the end of season 1, but it's so bad because it's like such a popcorn kind of show, and Netflix is such an enabler with their like autoplay thing. But we just sit there and we're like, oh my gosh, we have to watch the next episode. What happens next? So we stayed up until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning last night watching it. And because I'm so used to waking up early, I can't sleep in. So I woke up still this morning at like 7 o'clock. And so that's why I'm so tired today, is because I stayed up too late and woke up too early and just can't take a nap. So it's like, ugh. But I'm hoping we'll finish season 1 tonight, and then maybe we'll wait a little bit before we start season 2. So yeah, so that's been that. And then I want to talk a little bit about my trip to the yarn store. So like I said, I went to this yarn store, and I don't want to name it because I'm not in love with this yarn store, and I don't want to give it like a bad rap or anything because it just doesn't work for me. So I'm not going to name it, but anyway, it's here in Richmond. It's a very small place. It's like on the 2nd floor of like a house or something, and the 1st floor is like alterations or something like that. So it's pretty small. So I mean, I don't expect a lot. Like, it's definitely smaller than the yarn store I'm used to going to by Wesley's parents' place. But it's very small, and they don't have much for sock yarn selection in terms of what I'm looking for. Like, they carry a decent amount of like Regia and Opal, but that's about it. So they carry the Regia and the Opal, but they don't carry any solid colors. The closest to a solid color is like the yarn that I showed last week that I made my mother's boyfriend's first pair of socks out of, that are mostly solid but has the small little stripes of color every so often. That's about as close as you get to a solid color in the Regia and Opal that they carry there. And so that's kind of a bummer because, like I said, I want solid colors for these first couple rounds of socks. So that's kind of strike one. And like the Regia and the Opal are nice hard-wearing sock yarns, but they're not the softest. So they don't really carry anything that's like a merino, superwash merino nylon blend. So that's kind of a bummer too. They carry some like 100% superwash merino, which is not the best for socks. It's not the most hard-wearing. And then they carry like MCN yarns, which it's like, yeah, that's nice and soft and all, but I'm not going to pay $50 to make a pair of socks out of that. So yeah. So anyway, so I think that's why I probably won't be going back there unless I really need something that I think I could find there. I probably won't go back anytime soon. It's just not right for what I'm looking for, which is such a bummer because I had so hoped that I'd be able to frequent a local yarn store, but at the same time, a local yarn store is not going to fit within my budget. Like I said, I want to keep my average sock yarn cost per sock pair, whatever. I want to keep my cost to around $10 a pair at first, and there's just no chance that I'm going to get that in a store. So that's that. I'm kind of bummed about it, but whatever. I'll probably go back maybe once I get to like some of the later stages where I'm using yarns that, where I'd want like a striping yarn or something. Then maybe I'll head back there. But yeah, so that's that. That was kind of a bummer. I had hoped that maybe the first time I just didn't really look around enough and that I was like gonna go there again and, find what I was looking for, but nope. So yeah. Whatever. So we went there yesterday, and I was in and out in probably like 15 minutes because I just, I found what would work for me to kind of tide me over, and nothing else really spoke to me. So whatever. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for me this week. I'm feeling like I'm babbling. I'm getting tired. Like I said, I think I'm going to make a pot of coffee and have some cookies and coffee. I like to dunk cookies in coffee. I'm not a cookie and milk fan, partly because milk doesn't agree with my tummy. So I don't really like milk with cookies. I actually like hot beverages with cookies. And I don't know if that's because I'm gluten intolerant, so I eat gluten-free cookies. And the texture of gluten-free cookies can be really hit or miss, but I find that they pretty much universally have the same texture once they've been dunked in coffee. and I don't mind it. So I'm probably gonna make myself a pot of coffee, have some cookies, and go back to knitting on my Forest for the Trees socks. So yeah. Once again, thank you for joining me. Any links or anything like that will be either in the blog post, which you can find by following the link to the blog down below, or in the Ravelry thread for this week, this episode. Which again, I will link to the Ravelry thread down below, or the Ravelry group down below. Yeah, this has been great. Hopefully my tired brain hasn't completely turned you off and you'll be back next week. Yeah, I'll see you guys then. Bye!